Hi guys, welcome to another video. In this video we are talking about how the front end works, but we need to start with the web browsers. At the beginning, the internet exists first than the web browsers. The internet started working in 1991, but in 1995 the Internet Explorer appeared to change the internet life, because with the web browser, in this case with Internet Explorer, you have the opportunity to communicate a message or some information to many people in a website. And this website or a web page start at the first time just with an HTML code. That means that you only put information in some components or some elements, and that element has a structure, in this case the HTML. But at the beginning the Internet Explorer browser has many troubles and issues, and of course a lot of bugs. But if Internet Explorer doesn't exist, then we have the opportunity to improve the internet life, like today that we have many different web browsers and of course different ways to construct a web page and a website, and how to implement and show an information that we want to put in that site or website, and of course the context to develop that website. It's very different than some years ago, but the Internet Explorer started with that part, and later in 2003 the Safari, that it's a web browser that Apple construct, appeared to compete with the Internet Explorer, and in 2004 and 2008 appeared Mozilla and Google Chrome. And it's very important, these different flavors in the web browsers, because that permit to the internet and of course to the web browsers and the companies try to make a better experience to the final user. And in the middle of the time, from Internet Explorer to Google Chrome, of course appear different options or different tools to construct a better websites. These tools are the CSS and JavaScript. These three languages, HTML, CSS and JavaScript, you can construct a better websites, and of course you can give a better experience to the final user. And finally, some years ago, the Internet Explorer improved to a different web browser, in this case the Microsoft Edge. Actually we can use Safari, Mozilla, Google Chrome, Edge and some other web browsers to consult information in the internet. To this part we have the HTML, CSS and JavaScript languages, that it's the native languages from every web browser, and of course they are standardized for some organizations to have a clear idea about how you can construct a web page or a website or a web application based in the internet. But now we have two different parts in the construction of the web application. We have the front end and back end. In the front end side, we control all the interaction and of course a design and the behavior from an application, and in the back end we control only the behavior and the data from this application or web application. And we separate this because if you don't need to know some data that it's risk to share in front-end side, you have this part in the backend, and this of course give you a better security measures in your web application. you have the control of all the resources or services or data involved in your application, but this part is not controlled directly by the final user. And of course, this is the way that actually you can construct an application or a web application. We have the HTML that dictates the content and the structure of your web application or your web page, and the CSS that modifies the design and display in the presentation layer. And you have the other layer in the JavaScript. Here you can control the behavior of different elements. Of course, you can control HTML or CSS elements. And like I said previously, these three languages are the native languages for every web browser. We can construct the HTML code inside of the HTML tags, but we have three main parts of the HTML. We have the head. Here you can include metadata and links to services. We have the body. This part includes the elements that you can display in the web browser, and you have other part that it's the script in which you can link to JavaScript files. These files control the behavior from the elements in the body, for example, and these elements in the body can be maybe tags, attributes, links, images, divs, tables, etc. You have a lot of options to put in this section or in this part of the HTML code, and these elements are all the structure that it's displayed to the final user in the web browser. We have the CSS that it's very important because this layer will control all the design for your web application or your web page, and we can declare the design and apply it to some elements with the structure of the selector, declaration, property, and value. But previously, to construct an idea that we want to display in the web browser, we have some tools that give you the opportunity to construct a design or a mock-up, and this mock-up is the previous design, maybe in a Photoshop, Illustrator, Sketch, or Zeppelin. And then when you have the idea about how you want your design for your web application or your web page, then you proceed to code. And in the code part, you use the HTML for the structural and the CSS for the design. But in this part, in the design, we have a topic, the responsive web design. And this responsive web design is the approach that suggests that design and development should respond to the user's behavior and environment based on screen size, platform, and orientation. That means that you have, in the beginning, when you have the Internet Explorer, maybe the first versions of Mozilla or Safari, you construct your HTML and you have the CSS, but you have a static design. That means that you have the same page in a desktop and a tablet and a mobile devices. But actually you have a structure that applies to personal devices and other design to mobile devices. And you have this little change in how you can show or display your design in these different devices with the web responsive design, and that give you a dynamical design every different devices depending of the screen size, the platform, and of course the orientation of your device. But some years ago, when you construct a design, you start sometimes with the personal devices and finally you adapt your design to mobile devices. But right now you need to apply the mobile design first rule, because this rule gives you the opportunity to think first and how your design need to be constructed about your web page or your website, but focused in the mobile devices. And it's a good practice to think about to design first to mobile devices, because these mobile devices are in many people in all the world and are the devices that most use and access to different web pages, websites, web applications, and is the main point to the people to give you a feedback about if your application is good or not, based in how they interact in the user experience in the mobile. But of course, it's very important too to have a good design for the personal devices, because they are the second option. Normally consult some information or service or whatever that the people want, maybe to shop something in an e-commerce page. But every service that the people use have the first access to that information in a mobile device. But in this part, we can have different options. The first one is to implement your design directly in the CSS language, but you have other options. For example, you have the preprocessors that are an option to construct CSS, but more similar to the language development, and you have the options in Sass, Stylus, and less. But you have other option that is a pre-constructed design, and you have access to this design in something named like a framework. These frameworks have some structure that you just apply or use in your code or in your design, and you can change a little bit these frameworks or this design that is pre-constructed to personalize your application or your web design. And we have different flavors like Bootstrap, Bulma, Materialize, Semantic, and Foundation. And we have the last layer for the front-end side, that is the JavaScript, that is a lightweight interpreted or just-in-time complete programming languages with first-class functions. We can update and change both CSS and HTML, and can calculate, manipulate, and validate data. The first part about to change HTML and CSS, and of course the second about calculate, manipulate, and validate data are in the front side, because in this case we don't store or send information to the backend side. These different actions are part of the front side of the JavaScript, and we have two important elements or functions, that it's synchronous and asynchronous. The synchronous, like the name suggests, means you execute something in sequence. For example, every statement of the code gets executed one by one, but we have other part that it's the asynchronous. The asynchronous code allows the program to be executed immediately, where the asynchronous code will block further execution of the remaining code until it finishes the current one. That means in the synchronous, you execute every statement one by one, but you can execute the next statement if the previously don't finish. In the asynchronous, you can execute different statements at the time, but you or the program doesn't matter if one statement that execute first don't finish to finish the second statement, for example. And we have many options that it's related to the front end, like libraries or frameworks that work in this side. For example, React, Node.js, Vue, Angular, Backbone, Ember, and many other options that are available to construct applications. But all of these applications at the final need to be translated or compiled to a JavaScript language. And this is a little history about how the front end works, and of course where the internet starts and how the web browsers involve in the process to use an application based in an internet layer. And this gives you a better idea about the different parts that construct an application, in this case the HTML, the CSS and JavaScript, that are the base or the natural languages that support every web browser. But you have to an idea about the different flavors of the pre-constructed tools that give you an easy way to implement an application or a web page. And that's it, guys. See you in the next video.